Destoroyah, the de facto final boss of the Heisei era, and the death of Godzilla, and Shimu, the legendary ancient titan who froze Ghidorah. Both of these guys are really polar opposites. One of these guys is pure evil and pretty sadistic, to be honest, and the other one is pretty passive and chill. Not only that, they're both also clashing elements, with Destoroyah looking pretty hellish and invoking fire in most of his scenes, and then you have Shimu, who literally has an ice breath attack. So yeah, despite their blatant differences, both of these guys are benchmarks of power in their respective continuity, with both of these opponents forcing their respective Godzilla to evolve and pass his limits to become stronger than he's ever been before. This matchup is also pretty popular at the moment because of one little thing, and I'm of course talking about Shimu's ice breath, as Destoroyah has a weakness to extreme temperatures, so a lot of people seem to think that Shimu could freeze Destoroyah. Well, is this true? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But heck, maybe she doesn't even need that. Shimu is a pretty strong titan after all. Maybe she could just beat in Destoroyah. So for this week's video, we'll be answering both these questions. But before that, I'd like to thank you guys for the support, as even watching this video helps the channel grow. So for this week's like goal, since it's a pretty big matchup, I'm asking for 1,500 likes. I think that we can do it, and we've been able to hit that number pretty consistently, even by accident. Dropping a like tells me that you like these matchups and videos, and that I should be making more stuff of this nature. So yeah, if you feel like contributing to a bigger and stronger community, hit the like button. But with that out the way, let's get right into this matchup. Alright, so let's start off with the new girl on the block, being the Ice Queen herself, the ancient titan Shimu. Some important things to note about this is that I'm merely going to be doing a stats breakdown. Obviously that involves some inverse scaling, for example. Like Shimu's able to fight with evolved Godzilla, you know, meaning that automatically she upscales a lot of feats in the verse. But whether or not she's stronger than Ghidorah, or if evolved Godzilla is stronger than Burning, simply is information that's not notable for the video. So I don't want to distract you guys from the main topic, being Shimu versus Destoroyah, so that stuff's not going to be really touched on. So let's get into it. Shimu off the bat would at the very least be Ghidorah level, as Shimu was an enemy that forced Godzilla to store up energy, which the novel points out that he hasn't done since Ghidorah, which leads to characters to think that at the very least, Shimu is a threat on that level of power. And they do hint at the fact that she could possibly be stronger. Something pretty important to note is that by the end of the novel, the characters state that because of her sheer power, they assume the worst of her. So despite not knowing how she was, you know, as a personality wise, due to her sheer power, they were like, yo, this is bad. So overall, due to this, she would upscale feats performed by Godzilla in GVK. Godzilla during the events of this film wasn't even at base, but he has a feat where he could drill through the whole earth, which when calculated by itself would yield around large island results. But seeing as how Godzilla's atomic breath has multiple statements saying that his atomic breath works on a subatomic level, which is a state of matter even smaller than atoms, this would mean that Godzilla's drill would be destroying more stuff than, you know, just the rocks and ground and such like that. With this in mind, the calcs get boosted all the way up to moon level at a low end, small planetary at a mid end, and at just planetary at a high end. Godzilla absolutely scales to this output, as he was able to endure Mechagodzilla's beam, which according to Apex's files, Mechagodzilla's beam was shot at a frequency around 2100 times stronger than the drill that they saw go through the whole earth. Taking the mid-end value of around small planetary and then multiplying it by 2100 to accommodate for Mechagodzilla's beam output, we could say that Godzilla, who's not even at base during this point of film, can endure forces in the large planetary realm of power. This becomes especially impressive if you consider that Godzilla was at 50% of a base that wasn't even full power to begin with. So we can theoretically double the beam's output and get a closer estimate as to the full durability capacities of Godzilla, doubling the beam's output to accommodate for a full power based Godzilla, and we can say that he can endure forces in the dwarf star levels of power, which in all honesty would still be a low ball, because seeing as how at 50% he wasn't even critically injured or near death, this is just, you know, bare minimum estimates. Godzilla's durability would scale to his attack potency due to like Newton's third law, so yeah, he can, you know, swipe at that power, I guess, too. Shimu being able to box with an evolved Godzilla and endure his spiral ray would mean that at the lowest, she scales to the same large planetary, the dwarf star levels of attack potency. Moving on to some of her statements now and feats. She's stated to be a world destroyer and even a world ender multiple times throughout the promotion material. She's also referenced to be a threat that would need the combined efforts of evolved Godzilla and Glove Kong in order to subdue, and she literally throws around the ladder like a chew toy, and unironically even stun locks him with her ice breath. The novel also states that when Godzilla was rushing towards Shimu, that despite his evolved state, Kong could tell that Godzilla wasn't sure if he could beat Shimu, with the battle not having even started yet, which is a sentiment confirmed by Kong, who says that Shimu is absolutely stronger than Godzilla, who at this point of time is 2 times stronger than his previous base. So you can take that dwarf star level estimate and just multiply it by 2, and Shimu would still be like dwarf star level, even approaching star levels of power. She was so much stronger than base evolved Godzilla that Godzilla had to supercharge himself on top of his new state in order to find the matchup to be closer, with the novel saying that it became a toss-up. So both from a sheer power scaling and inverse point of view, Shimu's very powerful. And as for her speed now, automatically she would scale to such titans as Ghidorah and Kong, as she could fight on par with evolved Godzilla, who's faster than his previous base. Base Godzilla could wrestle with Ghidorah, who could dodge the atomic breath, which is composed of Sharenkai radiation, meaning that it's a beam that moves at 75% the speed of light, and Godzilla in base is objectively faster than Kong, as he was able to easily overwhelm the latter with, when he was being serious anyways, which is notable as Kong can react to the beam very consistently. For those of you guys saying that he's aim dodging, this doesn't make any sense, as he's physically not moving until the beam is already out of Godzilla's mouth. So yeah, that's like saying that you can aim dodge after a bullet's already fired. In order to actually dodge a projectile once it's fired, you would need speed relative to it. So yeah, Kong objectively showcased relativistic plus to even FTL perception and speed. And once again, Shimu would just upscale all of that, so she would fall into the same echelon of speed as all the high tiers in the verse, if not even faster. Moving on to her main projectile now, she has her ice breath, which is capable of creating ice ages and even freezing large land masses. And she's even implied to be the one to have frozen Ghidorah multiple times throughout the promotion as well. But most notably, the novel states that her freeze breath stops and slows down atoms until they cease from moving at all, which is a property of absolute zero temperatures. Using this aspect of her breath, one could argue that it's actually fired at this temperature. So Shimu pretty much has an absolute zero cannon that she can, use at will. So despite her somewhat passive demeanor, Shimu truly lived up to her title as a world ender, as she proved to be a force so powerful that she required the 2 strongest titans in the world to put their differences aside in the mere response to her presence. Just like Shimu, a huge chunk of Destoroyah's metas come from just general inverse scaling. Destoroyah is pretty much the de facto final boss of the Heisei era, so he literally just upscales 99% of the verse's feats and scaling. So let's just start at the beginning and work our way up. In the second film of this era, we're introduced to an enemy known as Biollante. She doesn't really do anything that's too impressive in her own film, but upon some context and some information that we learned after her death about it, we can get a nice gauge for her attack potency, because as it turns out, her cells were able to endure the power of a black hole and were subsequently exposed to multiple supernovas, which caused them to start to become Space Godzilla. And unironically, we have a calculation for this feat of durability, and it's been determined that a single one of these cells would be enduring multi-solar system to even galaxy levels of attack potency. And Godzilla, while rapidly losing energy, was able to critically injure a being who is composed of quadrillions of these cells. Heisei Godzilla would only become stronger, as in the next film, he would absorb a nuclear bomb, which made him 200 times stronger, as well as 20 meters taller. And then he would go on to absorb Rodan's life force, granting him the spiral heat ray, and then become even stronger once again, as he was able to absorb Space Godzilla's cosmic energy to power himself. Space Godzilla being a character who can absorb stars and even the universe itself, which is stated to be limitless or infinite. But if you think that's too far-fetched, Space Godzilla would still bare minimum be absorbing multi-galactic amounts of energy by absorbing the power of the universe. And then Godzilla ate that energy up and became so much stronger than Space Godzilla that if the former tried to siphon off energy off the latter, he would have just blown up. Keep in mind, Heisei Godzilla doesn't lose his amps, as he actually keeps them and they become his new base, as when he becomes Burning Godzilla after uranium deposits under his island ignited, due to the excessive amount of energy that Heisei Godzilla had stored up, this last bit of energy was the straw that broke the camel's back, as subsequently Godzilla overloaded and became Burning Godzilla, which is a state that's confirmed to make him more powerful, with a multiplier that's also stated to be greater than anything he's ever absorbed before. And Destoroyah can easily fight on par with him and literally drags him out throughout their fight, with guidebooks even saying that he knocked Godzilla out in a single blow. So yeah, Destoroyah's a monster. And as for his durability, it isn't anything to slouch at either, and I know this will confuse some people because yes, the military did kill him, but one should really consider that he was near death during this point in the film, as he took multiple shots of Godzilla's infinite heat ray, which is said to be both infinite in power and degrees. The fact that Destoroyah even survived one of these shots is an incredible testament to his durability. So yeah, him taking like 3 of these things and then getting killed by the military isn't an anti-feat at all. Moving on to his speed now, he's confirmed to be more powerful than Space Godzilla, and while yes, it's stated that he's stronger and not necessarily faster, it wouldn't really matter as Destoroyah was able to overwhelm and fight Heisei Godzilla, who was pretty much at the strongest he's ever been at. Keep in mind, inferior versions of Heisei Godzilla were shown to be able to react to Space Godzilla's crystals, Space Godzilla being a creature who was able to travel from the edge of the universe itself. During this trip, he also subsequently shot out crystals which were faster than him as they beat him to Earth, and Godzilla could react to these very same crystals. It's important to note that Space Godzilla or his projectiles wouldn't be hindered by the atmosphere, as Space Godzilla manipulates gravity and has total control of it, so you literally have to argue that Space Godzilla allows his speed and his stats to be nerfed on Earth, which doesn't really make any sense. But even then, that doesn't really matter, as Space Godzilla was shown pretty blatantly to be able to fight Mugira at those speeds while flying in space, so his combat speed and reactions would likely scale to his travel speed. The edge of the universe is 46.5 billion light years away, would mean that pretty much automatically Space Godzilla would fall into the MFTL plus ranges of speed, and once again destroy his scales. Alright, so I've made it pretty apparent that in terms of sheer attack potency and speed, this is kind of a wash in Destroyer's favor. Shimu, if we're going to use consistent metas, is around dwarf star level to even star level possibly, while Destroyer is likely multi-solar system level at a low end, but likely at least galaxy level, especially if one were to talk about how much he upscales like 99% of the verse, and it's, you know, pretty considerable. Even if you attempted to bring out the Monarch Legacy of Monster statements that seem to imply that the Hollow Earth is relative to a supermassive black hole in terms of energy output, and then stack that on the fact that in Godzilla vs. Kong, the human characters state that the Hollow Earth's energy is merely almost as potent as Godzilla, that wouldn't really mean anything because you have a full base Godzilla who scales to a supermassive black hole, and then you have a single one of Biolante's quadrillions of cells, which, you know, it gets to that same level. So unironically, wanking MV Godzilla using Monarch statements only gets him relative to a single Biolante cell. So yeah, there's levels to solar system level, and Destroyer's just way deeper into it. And even if they were somehow relative in the attack potency department, wouldn't make up for the speed. Shimu's around FTL at best, while Destroyer is casually MFTL plus. But I'm sure you guys know all of that. So allow me to take the time to answer the question you've all been thinking. Could Shimu freeze Destoroyah? Well, realistically, the gap in stats is just so big that more times than not, I would argue this is a blitz in one shot. And the beam is just so slow that it would never ever tag him. And even if it did hit him, Shimu's breath is very easily interruptible, as evolved Godzilla and even Mothra could interrupt the beam in its tracks. So who's to say that Destoroyah couldn't shoot a micro-oxygen beam and not only stop Shimu, but kill her in the process, due to the sheer gap in strength between the two. But let's give into the idea that Shimu hits Destoroyah with no interruptions. What would happen? So alright, drumroll please. Absolutely nothing. But how, you may ask? Isn't Destoroyah weak to extreme temperatures? And yeah, that is true, but considering Godzilla needed a beam that was really infinite in degrees in order to start to chip away at Destoroyah, it seems that you need very, very, very extreme temperatures. But we have proof in the movie that a beam shot at absolute 0 degrees would not be enough to freeze or critically injure Destoroyah. Alright, so first things first, how cold is absolute 0? Absolute 0 has always been a scientific concept that people have been talking about. In layman's terms, it's a level of degrees that entails a total absence of heat, which, as previously mentioned, causes all molecules to stop moving. So with this in mind, it's been theorized and widely accepted that at absolute coldest, absolute 0 would cap at around minus 273.15 degrees Celsius. Overall, pretty cold stuff, but how cold are the weapons of the JSDF? Because if you looked into it, you would know that they're around minus 200 degrees Celsius. And you might be like, yeah, absolute 0 is around 40% colder, and those very same weapons killed Destoroyah. Well, you have to remember, like I said, Destoroyah was already super weakened as he took multiple shots of the infinite heat ray. If him literally coughing up blood and trying to run away wasn't evident enough to prove why he was weakened, when he was a crab, he tanked these very same weapons on screen very blatantly, with guidebooks stating that as a juvenile in the state, Destoroyah did not appear to sustain any serious damage at all from these cold-based weapons, with another statement saying that verbatim, these weapons were useless. So let me ask you guys again, do you think that fully grown perfect form Destoroyah would be frozen by a beam that's only 40% colder than something that he no-celled while much weaker. And yes, Destoroyah's resistance to temperature-based weapons is directly correlated with his power growth. Because yes, those major cannons that were around minus 200 degrees Celsius were working on the human-sized Destoroyahs, but once they became stronger and, formed together, they ceased to work at all. And as explained, Destoroyah becoming much stronger is the reason why these cold-based weapons stopped working. Because as explained, due to his power growth, his exoskeleton became more durable, which resulted in him being able to no-cell these weapons. This is important because we know that when he evolves into his perfect form, he becomes 500 times stronger, meaning that his exoskeleton should logically have become 500 times more durable. So objectively, a beam that's only 40% colder than weapons that he no-celled as a crab, they wouldn't work. And we can actually quantify it, because if he can no-cell temperatures of minus 200 degrees due to his new power, when he gets 500 times stronger and evolves into his perfect form, he would be able to endure cold of around minus 100,000 degrees. And that's based on pure math, from values that are officially shown in the film as well as in supplementary material. But hey, I guess that means that Shimu could freeze and critically injure a weakened Destoroyah who fell apart from attacks that he could endure as a crab, but I don't think anyone's talking about a weakened Destoroyah when they talk about this matchup specifically. So with Shimu's only win con being taken away, i.e. exploiting Destoroyah's weakness to extreme temperatures, I don't think I need to tell anyone that Shimu's breath by itself is not strong enough to hurt Destoroyah. So yeah, the winner of today's video is Destoroyah via blitzing in one shot and, no-selling all of Shimu's attacks, including her freeze breath. So yeah, was this the outcome you expected, or were you pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised? Be sure to let me know in the comments. Also, while you're down there, be sure to let me know what kaiju matchups you want to see in the near future, as I'm always down to make a Godzilla video. But as always, I'll see you guys next week, but until then, stay big G fans.